Welcome back to the Talking Cars podcast. I'm Alex Nizick.
I'm Maddie McCarty.
And I'm John Lincove.
All right, so today we are primarily going to be talking about the 2025 Buick Enclave that we purchased for our testing program. And then, of course, later on, we will also talk about and address some questions that we got for some viewers. So definitely stick around for that as well. So before we get into kind of how this car drives and what it's like to live with, we'll talk about what we bought. So first of all, it's a mid-size 3-row SUV, and it's kind of on the larger side of the mid-size 3-row SUV spectrum. Kind of the trend in this segment is that these vehicles are getting larger, more third-row room, that type of thing. But then you have some smaller vehicles in the segment too. You know, just for example, you have the Highlander and the Grand Highlander. They're both mid-size 3-row. This is more grand than it is regular. We'll say that. So anyway, so this, 2025 Buick Enclave, it's the Sport Touring model, which is the middle trim that we purchased. We got all-wheel drive, which was about $2,000. Super Cruise, which is their hands-free driving assist system, for about $3,000. The Power Package, which adds power third-row seats, a HUD, and memory seats, and some other things, for about $1,500. Panoramic sunroof, another $1,500. The white paint cost us $1,100, which is kind of crazy because it's ultimately white. Yeah. But okay, looks all right. Ultimately, in the end, we paid $58,385, which includes a $1,395 destination fee. And just for some context, we paid about $50,000 for our Chevrolet Traverse and our GMC Acadia. So this is a little bit more expensive. And lastly, this car was the final assembly point was Lansing, Michigan, which is actually where all of three of these cars are built. But that might be, kind of important to some buyers. So I'd like to point that out. So John, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about, I mentioned the Acadia and the Traverse a couple times there. Set the stage for us. How similar are these three vehicles? How different are they? Just tell us about that.
Yeah, they're so this is the top, consider the Enclave the top luxury version of these triplets, but there's actually a kind of like a cousin, the Cadillac XT6 that hangs out there because this is the second generation of GM's C1 platform. It's C1-2. So it debuted with these, with the Chevy. The XT6 uses it still on the first generation. So these are bigger, like you said. The XT6, the 3-row is a little smaller. And to your point, the Buick is more expensive, $4,000 when you're comparing the trims, more than the other ones.
Yeah, little higher price cap, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And they've got the same 2.5 liter engine again that has the same noises, the same raucous sound that makes it almost worse in this case, in my opinion, because you think that this is the top one. It's the luxury version, what it is. And then they're identical dimensionally. So wheelbase, everything. The Traverse may weigh a little less than the others. I went into these details trying to find the significant differences. And really the big thing is you get some mechanical, like the heavy duty cooling system is standard on the GMC and the Chevy. It's optional on the Buick. Okay, those are going to tow probably. Carry, this isn't going to tow.
Sure.
Hitch view guidance system standard on the Chevy, optional on the Buick. GMC has wheel and tire packages, like a ton, like the chrome lug bolts, lug nuts, and all.
It's really details.
It's small details. I mean, the biggest thing is really interesting. All the Enclaves and the Acadias get the active noise cancellation, which I think is key for talking later about the noise.
I don't know how much it helps, but
exactly, yeah, and it's it's about both a mechanical noise cancellation as well as wind and such. They make a different. There's a differentiator in there in the options list, but very strange. Really, the Avenir trim is the biggest difference. You get this top luxury.
Yeah.
But here's the GM problem, is that, in my opinion, it's back to the badge engineering in a sense. They're one of the only manufacturers that has such a diverse product line that it's really hard price-wise to differentiate between. No one's mistaking a Volkswagen for an Audi anymore. No one's mistaking a Honda for an Acura anymore. For the most part, they are significantly different. It's hard to tell aside from some
you hop
soft
in one
materials.
And you feel like you've hopped in all of them in a way.
And maybe the Buick's not as great.
Experience.
So let me not.
No, I think that's spot on. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because had they cost wildly different, we would probably be saying, well, they're so similar. So why is there a big price delta? But then to your point, it does make it confusing when you're looking at these three trying to choose, because they cost very similar and ultimately have similar features. But
I mean, you've got people who are loyal to. I don't want to rant on, but you have people who are like, I'm buying the Chevy. Even though the GMC is the same exact thing.
Might be a big part of the reason these three exist, right? But there are, I think you mentioned badge engineering, and GM of old, they would have looked identical too, right? And that is a big difference. They do have different styling, so the body panels are different and things like that. But I think also, Maddie, the next biggest, most obvious difference is on the interior with the controls. It's really how they're differentiating these three vehicles.
Yeah, if it comes down to which one you want because you're happy with how all of them drive, then look at the controls inside the car, because those actually do differ quite a lot visually, and also just the interactions with them. So in the Buick, we have a really massive 30-inch kind of panoramic screen.
Yes,
includes
really long.
The driver screen right in front of you, and then it extends all the way with the center screen. They call it the ultra wide screen, and true to its name, it is quite large. It includes controls not only on like this left side of the driver screen, but all the way across. There's like not even a blank space really of where controls are not. So it actually, it looks nice, but it's really hard to use because it's so cluttered and everything is quite small, and there are buttons that are just blocked by the steering wheel rim because there's no gap in that screen. And so, it's really hard
like
to
seamless
use.
from drivers to all the way across.
Yeah.
Right?
So it looks nice.
It's curved too. Like, so it has that nice look, like, they're making it closer to me.
Yes,
and
they're
the
trying to bring
Cadillac
it
panel
closer.
on the side, like you said.
Right. Yeah, we first saw that in the Escalade, I think, right?
Yeah. So that differs from like the Traverse, where it's very, very similar like interaction style. The screens, you have a separate driver and center screen, but the Acadia is very interesting because it has like a 15-inch screen and it's more portrait oriented. So I personally find portrait-oriented screens typically more difficult to use because it's harder to like get the center of the screen because there's nothing really to anchor your hand onto as much.
Yes, good point.
So
I guess
it
pushes a lot of things low down.
Very low down. Yeah, especially like the climate controls. Always found myself looking down. So the Enclave does have that going for it, but something that I don't know if either of you used Android Auto or Apple CarPlay.
Probably my biggest issue.
It is so small. It doesn't even like extend to the edges of the screen. It kind of just like sits in the center.
It's ironic how big when you measure it a certain way, you get however many inches, you mentioned it's huge, right? But then all the buttons and the backup camera is tiny.
So
right?
tiny.
All these
There's
things
so much
end up
space
being,
for them to work with, but they don't utilize it. So
maybe not the best form factor for an automotive screen.
No.
So
I think that's going to be something that if someone is debating between which one they want, hop in those cars and then take it for a test drive and see how easy it is or difficult it is for you to just change your driver temperature or, change the climate, adjust the radio, like go to different songs, just try it out and see what it's like. The most basic features are going to be very similar between the three. So like your windshield wipers and your headlights, those are going to be very similar, but it's like the things that you're still doing every single day, every time you drive, those are going to be more difficult, I think, in these cars.
And it does, a lot of the software is similar to what we've seen in other GMs, right? As far as the Google integration and the headlights you mentioned, I believe are in the screen, right? They're not physical controls. So,
yes, the gear selector's on the column, which people, I think, will get used to. It's kind of like the old school one, the shifter on the steering column.
I've come around to it. I'm not going to lie.
It's got 3 on the tree right there. It's got park reverse. Or 4, right?
Like we're driving a lot of GM vehicles lately with all these 3 we're talking about, and then some others too. And when I get into a non-GM car, I do find myself reaching for the column. And it's kind of intuitive, but
you get used to it.
Physical climate controls, right?
Yeah, you got some physical climate controls, thank goodness, because I think in like some other Chevys, they don't really have a lot of they don't have like those physical climate controls that you really want. Right. These ones you do have some. So at least you can do your temperature, and that's what it's got going for it.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's not the worst thing to use, right? But it definitely has some deficiencies with that screen layout and everything. So the other difference I found with this one in a positive way is actually the ride. I don't know if you guys felt that way, but none of these vehicles are sporty or anything like that. And they all seem to ride pretty well, but this one just seemed to have an extra layer of kind of comfort when it came to absorbing bumps and things like that. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
It did. I remember driving it early on, so I'm not when we're putting miles on it, we're not really banging on them, breaking them in. But yeah, it's comfortable, isolated. It's the reason why I would suggest one of these over a Tahoe, over a Yukon.
Oh, sure.
Just in the sense of and then this one up, I'd put it against the Cadillac in the sense of the Cadillac, the big giant Cadillacs sometimes, they're truck based, the Escalade. So this gives you size, but doesn't give you that harsh ride. And it's just a little more refined. It's a little quieter from wind noise, but and that I think helps just with the experience of the driving experience overall.
Yeah, totally. So we should talk about what's not different. And I think one of the most obvious things here is the new turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, right? And kind of the consequences that come along with that, right? So, maybe John, if you want to talk to us about that experience.
Yeah, it's so like you said, there's an 8-speed transmission, it's a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, and it just is raucous. It's agricultural. It screams. I mean, under acceleration, it just makes itself known. It's out of place in the luxury vehicle.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, if you have the active noise cancellation, you have more firewall insulation and more foam in the doors, that you got to do something about the engine. You have to do something at least in that model.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, they're getting a lot of power and torque out of this pretty small engine, which it's under a lot of load. So I don't know. They're pretty successful about making 4 cylinders quieter in other vehicles, like the smaller Equinox, for example, right? Like much better.
Yeah. This one was just like shocking. Like I thought there was something wrong with the car until I went into like our logbook where everyone writes their notes, and someone literally put like an old one of those old
I think I might have done that.
I'm showing my age right
it's
now.
Like it's one of those old record players that has the big horn.
Yes. Those things.
Whatever. What is that called?
Gramophone.
Thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah, a gramophone.
One of those under the hood, just like in this giant cavity, screaming, right?
Yeah. And I literally thought something was wrong with it, and other people did too, of like shocked, and like their passengers were talking about how shocked they were that the engine was this loud. So I don't know what it is with this one.
Yeah. But, and it's loud in all of them, but for me, there is this point, I don't know, it was like 3,500 RPM or so where you're accelerating maybe up a hill, so the engine's got some load on it, and it just resonates in your ears and inside the cabin. It's just like, whoa, that is not what I would expect and pretty unpleasant.
Right, because the previous gen with the 6-cylinder, it was just, I think a 3.6 V6, and they were just great engines. They were, it's the same type of thing we talk about with Toyota, though Toyota not to the same extent. The small engine it's working hard.
Yeah.
And you're hearing it. It ruins the experience overall. Yeah, I mean, it really does.
Yep. And then as far as driving the vehicle, I mean, we talked about the ride, but it's pretty similar, right? It's not sporty, but it's one of the reasons I think you would choose something like this over a Tahoe or larger, heavier body on frame vehicles, right? It's just more sophisticated to drive.
I see a lot of people in my town who have, and they all have 3 kids. I mean, you get into a vacation, you have 3 kids, you definitely have a lot of luggage, but expeditions and Tahoes and even some people in new Sequoias, which I don't know why, these serve the purpose, especially if you're putting a cargo thing on the top, you're already overloading. So, and you're getting better mileage around town regularly. So positive for that engine versus a big full frame V8, et cetera.
Yeah, actually, this might be a good moment to plug that new article we put up where we tested and found out all the cargo space essentially behind the upright third row. This is an issue that some people have, is when you put up the third row in some of these vehicles, you end up with a really, really narrow cargo space. So it's like, okay, you have to almost make the choice. Do I carry people or do I carry stuff?
Yeah.
And this is one of the vehicles in the segment, and the other 2, sister vehicles, if you will, that with the third row up, you do still have decent cargo space. And we actually have an article now that shows you kind of where they all stack up. And there are some larger vehicles like the Sequoia that you mentioned that you would expect to be high up on that list, and it's not. Yeah. So this is one where you really can put people back in there and their stuff, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So Maddie, we paid for the optional Super Cruise system. Yes. So tell us about that. What it is, how it works, and if Buick's doing anything, unique with it here.
Sure. Yeah. So Super Cruise, like you said before, is a hands-free version of lane centering assistance combined with adaptive cruise control. It is available on all 3 trims, or all trims actually, that the Enclave offers. Something to know about Super Cruise is that you get the first 3 years for free, but then you have to pay a subscription after that. So that is something that is not true for all systems out there, but it is specific for Super Cruise in this case. So in terms of how Super Cruise compares, we have it also equipped on the Traverse and also on other GMs that we have. Yep. And they all are very, very similar. So if you go from the Traverse to the Enclave, the controls are going to look similar. The interface is going to look similar. And the performance is going to vary a little bit just because of where the sensors are placed and how it's calibrated to each individual vehicle. But overall, the lane centering is pretty good. Very good, actually. It does keep the vehicle fairly centered in the road with our preliminary testing. So you can also, you take your hands off the wheel, and I felt pretty confident with how it was driving during the preliminary testing. One thing that Super Cruise does lack is the ability for drivers to give their own input. So this means that if I want to steer to the left in order to give maybe a bicyclist some room, it's going to go to standby automatically. Yeah. So I'm going to lose that lane centering support. And so that is just something that you have to be aware of, because many other systems will allow you to steer within the lane and a little bit outside of the lane. Right. Yeah. So very good system overall. It actually scored the second highest in our L2, level 2 active driving assistance evaluation that we do. It did score right below Blue Cruise. Okay. So it is up
Ford's
there.
System.
Ford's Blue Cruise, yes. Thank you. It's up there in performance with BMW and Mercedes, Toyota. So there's a lot of other competitors that people can look at. But yeah, overall, very good system. Something that stands out is its direct driver monitoring system. So that's a camera that's going to be monitoring where the driver is looking and making sure that they're looking at the road. And if they're not looking at the road, the system is going to try to re-engage the driver through alerts and maybe some sort of seat vibrations. That's something that's also unique with GMs, is a lot of people, they don't like it when the car beeps at them.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people too.
Yeah.
But it will kind of vibrate the seat. So it's a silent but effective way to kind of alert the driver that something is happening and you should look at the road or, figure out what's going on. So that does stand out with Super Cruise. So.
And there are some caveats, right? This only works on divided highways that have basically been mapped and kind of approved, we'll say, by GM ahead of time. Yes. So you can't use it everywhere.
Right.
And I think that also comes into play where you can't use lane centering at all, let alone Super Cruise on those non-mapped roads, right? Like you can in other vehicles that don't have this system.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a potential con, depending on how people like to use it. But so with Ford, you have Blue Cruise that you can use on these divided highways, but then you can also go off the highway and just use regular lane centering.
Right.
So it's not going to be hands-free, but it still provides you with that lane centering assistance. So yeah, definitely something to consider if people are interested in having some sort of assistance more than just on the highway.
Right. And it's not like Buick or GM in this case offers, the non-Super Cruise version of LCA or lane centering. You have to get that, right?
Yeah,
so you're kind of take it or leave it, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on to audience questions, to wrap up the Buick, basically, if you were, forced to get one of these three, the Enclave, the Acadia, the Traverse, which one would you get? And if it would, let's say you weren't forced, would you get some other 3-row, mid-size SUV if you were shopping in that segment? John?
So one of the issues is just the price. You could get an Acadia Elevation trim, which was $10,000 less, and it's very, very nicely equipped. I do like these because I like Super Cruise. I like the size. I kind of like the looks of the Tahoe better than the other ones. But the Traverse than the other ones. Okay. But they are still big, unwieldy vehicles. Yeah. I would totally recommend it for someone who is in the 3-row category. I actually prefer the interiors to the Toyota offerings, but I do think the Pilot, even though the rear seat, it's probably less generous. Yeah. Cargo area, a little less generous with the 3rd row up. Yeah. I think the Pilot is really a key one in this category.
Interesting. Yeah. Maddie, how about you?
So I took a road trip with the Acadia. So I felt like for, 2.5 hour trip, it was good. It was a pleasant experience. However, I did miss the Super Cruise that the Traverse and the Enclave have. So as equipped as we purchased them, I would get the Traverse. It's almost the same price. Yeah. So, and it has those 3 free years of Super Cruise. Yeah. But it's not my top choice in terms of any 3-row that I could get. Okay. I think I would get a Highlander. Grand Highlander is a little bit too big for me. So I would just do like the lower end, and I would get the Highlander.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think they're pretty good options in the segment, right? They're a good balance of the size and whatnot. But I'd probably check out maybe a less expensive version of the Buick. I like the better ride quality. You can't really get away from the engine noise if you choose any of these, so you're kind of stuck with that. Agree on Super Cruise, but yeah, if I was in the segment, I think the Pilot is a good thing to cross shop. But then I'd also be interested in the Grand Highlander Hybrid Max with that that kind of more powerful hybrid powertrain. Nice it's pretty nice. So
that's true. That's true.
But ultimately, there's a lot of good options in the segment. So if you're shopping, take a look.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to audience questions. And of course, if you want to submit a question, go to cr.org/talkingcars and you can submit it there. Text or video questions are great too. So our first one today is from Jake from Chicago. And he says, I'll soon need a second car and keep being drawn to Toyota and Lexus simply due to the sheer number of hybrid options. But I've been very frustrated by the crazy tire sizes on many models, which leave very few options for replacement and could potentially put owners in a bind after a flat, especially with no spares being offered. For example, the Prius XLE and Limited has a strange 195/50 R19 size, and the Crown Signia a 235/45 21, and so on. So what gives? Do tire manufacturers see the need in these cars and make tire sizes available over time, or are these niche enough cars that finding a tire will continue to be an issue? Thanks from a new subscriber. All right, so John, a lot going on in this question, but basically, are the tire sizes of these vehicles unique? Are we going to be able to find replacements?
So I went and talked with Ryan Pizolkowski. I challenge you to spell it. His last name.
I can't.
Our tire expert. And he said when a new model comes out, when a new vehicle comes out with a new tire size, there's only a few options, mostly the original equipment, the OE tire. And then the manufacturers jump in, assuming that it's going to be a higher volume car. And what's interesting is that the Prius has been historically popular, but this is it is the only one out there that offers this 195/19 that fits the 195/19. There are two options, two all seasons, the OE and a Michelin, and then there's one snow tire. And that's it. So yeah, if you are in an area that may not be a Prius stronghold in the sense of sales, you could be stuck if you get a sidewall rip. You're not getting any goo and any of the tire filler. But in the same vein, overnight shipping, you might be stuck a day.
Yeah,
I mean, we've gotten giant BMW 7 Series tires shipped up to Vermont, and this was 10 years ago overnight. You can't drive home that day, but you're stuck. Yeah. The point about the Crown Signia is that even though it's a new model and it's definitely more rare and lower sales than the Prius, there are a lot of SUVs out there. There's Volkswagen, Toyota, Mercedes, Ford, Audi. They all make models using this 235/21. So interesting. You're probably going to have a better chance of finding that tire. Prius sales are dropping compared to historical sales. So it could be that you're stuck with this one car. It's going to have this one narrow, tall tire. And it is. So I wouldn't necessarily say don't buy it because of that tire.
Right.
Unless you really travel in an area like you travel gravel roads, you're just doing stuff that's beyond the norm. Then you might be stuck.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's also worth mentioning that both of these cars that Jake mentions, the Crown Signia and the Prius, they have other trims that have different wheels and tires. And so, it might be a little extra effort or work, but let's say you wanted that higher trim, you could theoretically go get the smaller wheel and tire and put that on there too, or get the lower version of the Crown Signia that comes with a smaller wheel. And maybe those, I don't know for sure, but maybe those tire sizes are more common.
Yeah, you could check the fitment, make sure that there's not something weird about brake size or whatever.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Which is probably unlikely. There's probably the same brake throughout.
Most likely,
yes, just use the uglier, the less fancy wheels, and you're going to have a better tire option.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
I mean, it starts to push when they redesigned the Prius, right? They kind of had these competing interests, right? They wanted to make the wheels bigger to make it more attractive looking and make it, sportier because, as you mentioned, sales going down and there are other hybrid options now. So they kind of needed to boost the appeal, but they still want the fuel economy. So now you end up with this weird tire that's trying to serve both purposes, right? Kind of reminds me of the i3 tire, right? That was like probably even narrower than that and really tall.
Oh yeah, that and that other one with the gull wing, the BMW with the gull, i8, right. I mean, that thing was bizarrely small tires. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So thank you, John, for that. So we're going to move on to our second question, which comes from Sean from Pensacola, Florida. And this is actually a video question.
Hey, Talking Cars. I've been listening to your show for a while. I'm a big fan. I have a 2009 Toyota Highlander with 281,447 miles. It's been a very reliable car. However, I had to put in $1,100 recently to get it running again, and last year I had to pay about $1,500 for a similar issue. I love the car, but my problem is, do I want to continue putting all this money into a vehicle that's this old with this many miles? I've considered upgrading it. I just don't know if I should keep holding on to it or get something newer. It's got to be something that is fuel efficient, but also can fit bikes, dogs, my life. Anyway, I appreciate the feedback. Thanks so much.
So Sean from Florida, he essentially has this older 2009 Toyota Highlander. It's got over 280,000 miles on it, which is awesome. I mean, he really used that car, which is cool. But he's wondering, should I put more money into it or should I buy something else? So Maddie, let's start with you. What do you think Sean should do?
As sad as it is, I think it's time for Sean to say goodbye to his 2009 Highlander.
Yeah.
I think he might be interested in a 2024 or later Highlander. So first off, I'm assuming still wants a lot of space for his dog. And so the 2025 Highlander, or 23 actually, you get an increased cargo size. I think it's actually like 6.5 inches longer than the 2009 one. So definitely a lot of space. You get better fuel economy, and especially if you get the hybrid version, you get up to like 35 miles per gallon, whereas the 2009 was about 18. So definitely better. And then what I think is the most important, at least for me, because this is my area that I deal with, is the increase in your safety features. So my guess is that the 2009 version did not have anything, or
certainly not what we have today.
Yes. ESC.
Maybe those.
AEB, blind spot,
rear cross traffic. And pedestrian detection. Like these are all things that are like standard now and can be so helpful at reducing the risk of crash. So I think that's something to definitely consider. All the 2023 and higher, they come standard with a Toyota Safety Sense 2.5 Plus, and if you get the 2024, that comes standard with blind spot warning and rear cross traffic warning. And our surveys show that people love these. Like once you have blind spot, you don't want to go back. So I think this is definitely something to really consider if he really wants a new car versus keeping his old one.
No, I love that you brought up the safety angle, because I like to remind people it is often the more economical choice, if you will, to keep kind of your older car going and maintain it, even though it feels like big payments at the time, right? Than buying something new. But you're missing out on those safety features, and even down to the crash performance of that car, right? Metal advances in technology, right? The airbags, the design of these crumple zone, everything really is coming together just as time goes on. So that I think really is one of the biggest, drivers to get something new. But John, what do you feel?
So similar considerations. I'm guessing based on what he said that he might be he was maybe threw down $2,500 over 6 months to make repairs. So assuming if he's going to be spending $5,000 a year, potentially, on fixing things, that's like about a $21,000 budget at that point. So he could get a 2021-22 Kia Sorento, front wheel drive, because he's in Pensacola, Florida. I don't see a need for all wheel drive down there. It's the exact same size as his Highlander.
Nice.
It's a smaller category. It's dropped down to a more like a big compact, small mid-sized SUV, but dimensionally same thing. Better fuel economy, has 3 rows just in case he needs that. And to your point, all the modern safety features were available. I didn't check. I was running out of time, so I don't know exactly which version came with, but it's going to have blind spot warning. It's going to have forward collision warning. It's going to have, again, high strength steel, all the things that
better headlights,
and better comfort and convenience. So just that. That's why I went used, the new market. It's pricey nowadays, So I mean, I'm not going to just be like, oh yeah, just get a new Highlander, or a new Sorento or any of that stuff. Yeah, I think he could get something like that. It's about 3 or 4 years old at this point. It's a good sweet spot.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar. I was looking at new, but the newer Santa Fe, Hyundai Santa Fe. I liked it because he mentioned dogs and bikes and his lifestyle, essentially, right? And the new Santa Fe is this very squared off kind of SUV. It's longer. You put all those seats down, and then the hatches, it kind of goes from width to width, side to side of the car. So it just allows for a lot of easy loading and things like that. So I thought, and it comes with a hybrid option that is also front wheel drive if you want it, which is great. So, maybe in a year or something like that, you can get a good used one. But yeah, so some great options.
If he has a space, hold on to that. You're not going to get $1 for that. I mean, you might have to pay someone to take it away. So, keep it.
You can always donate it, right?
You could donate it, but to the point of you could run it, you could really run it in the ground and keep it as a dogmobile and keep the new one a little cleaner.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it for today's show. And remember, if you want to submit a question, it's cr.org/talkingcars. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.